working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. The South Korean and U.S. militaries fired a volley of missiles into the sea in response to North Korea firing a ballistic missile over Japan. Tear gas launched was not in the police's crowd control plan when the authorities had predicted a potential conflict, according to Indonesia's National Police Commission, revealing its initial assessment on Tuesday. The Philippine Statistics Authority said the consumer price index for September this year rose 6.9%, which is mainly driven by faster food inflation. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. guaranteed that the Philippines' resiliency and adaptation to the new normals of climate change are on top of his administration's national agenda. And tonight in our news, the South Korean and U.S. militaries fired a volley of missiles into the sea in response to North Korea firing a ballistic missile over Japan, according to Seoul. Take a look. Nuclear-armed North Korea fired an intermediate-range ballistic missile over Japan for the first time in 5 years on Tuesday, and that prompted Tokyo to issue evacuation warnings for some residents. Seoul's military said South Korea and the U.S. staged a drill of their own in response, firing ground-to-ground missiles into the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said both militaries fired two ATACMs, short-range ballistic missiles, into the water to precisely strike a virtual target. In a CNN report, Michelle Palom-Barrett, a Korean Studies professor at UP Diliman's Asia Center, whose research focuses on Filipino migration in Korea, said the lives of many Filipinos in South Korea are in danger if North Korea goes into an all-out war. Mostly comprised of migrant workers, Filipinos will be forced to go home without finishing their contract and possibly go home jobless in the Philippines. U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida decried North Korea's latest launch in the strongest terms. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol called the launch a provocation, and vowed a stern response. Meanwhile, the Tuesday's test was Pyongyang's fifth missile launch in 10 days. Take a look.
To say that the U.S. government condemns this dangerous and reckless launch, we think that is unacceptable. It is a clear violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, and it again demonstrates the DPRK's unlawful and destabilizing activities in the region.
今までいっぱい飛んできてたんですけれども、なんだろう、分かってはいたけど実感がなくて、でもやっぱり近くに東京都の島の方とか北海道とかに飛んできて、実際にJアラートとかも発動されて、なんか改めてその身近な危険なんだなっていうのをすごく感じました。
The North Korean missile that prompted an evacuation alert flew over northeastern Japan on Tuesday and landed in the sea outside the country's exclusive economic zone. The missile led to a rare activation of the J alert system, which you can hear here, which appeared on screen showing national broadcaster NHK and warned residents in the north and northeast of the country to seek shelter. The country's missile alert warning system was activated at 7:29 a.m. Monday local time. Around 30 minutes later, the Prime Minister's office then tweeted that a projectile that appears to be a North Korean ballistic missile has likely flown over Japan. In a statement, Japan's Coast Guard said the missile appeared to have already landed in the sea and warned vessels not to approach any falling objects. Meanwhile, South Korean and U.S. fighter jets carried out precision bombing drills in response to North Korea firing an intermediate-range ballistic missile over Japan. 4 South Korean Air Force F-15K jet fighters and 4 U.S. Air Force F-16 fighters flew in formation, and South Korea's F-15K fired 2 bombs against a virtual target. Meanwhile, Japanese and U.S. military planes also carried out a joint military drill Tuesday in response to the North Korean ballistic missile launch. Japan's joint staff said 8 Japanese and 4 U.S. fighter jets took part in the drill and airspace west of the country's Kyushu region. The announcement comes shortly after Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida held talks with the head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral John Aquilino. The ballistic missile launch early on Tuesday was the first time a North Korean missile. Filipino fisherman Mariel Villamonte had spent years plying the turquoise water of Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea for snapper and grouper until a Chinese Coast Guard vessel cannoned his boat. And that was in 2013 or 2012 rather, around the time China snatched control of the small ring of reefs from the Philippines, and he has not dared go back. Take a look.
Nawala pa yung mga Chinese Coast Guard dyan, sir. Ano yan, malaya kaming mangisda, labas at loob niyan. Pwede kami kung saan mamundo sa loob. Kung saan kami namumundo sa loob, doon namin iiwan yung mother boat, safe doon. Doon kami nangisda, labas at loob.
So maraming isda doon?
Oo, marami pang isda yan. Noon, hindi pa kinalkal yung gitna niyan. Hindi pa sinira. August 17. Nung nakapasok kami, kasi umalis yung mga China dyan eh. Umiwas sa dadaanan ng bagyo. Kasi madadaanan yung Scarborough Shoal eh. Yun, nakapasok kami. Walang bantay eh. Tapos, nung pagkaraan ng yung bagyo, 24 oras lang, lilipas na yan eh. Pagka umaga noon ulit, nandyan na sila bumalik. Nandun na. Si 3301, nagbaba na ng rubber boat na 2. Pinasok kami sa loob. Go outside. Lumabas na kami. Kasi masakit talaga sa loob. Na hindi kapayagan din mangisda doon. Biruin mo, sila lang may karapatan mangisda doon sa loob. Samantalang sa atin yung Scarborough Shoal.
Anong pakiramdam mo?
Parang na rin, sir. Para ka magnanakaw sa sarili mong bakuran. Ganun na lang. Parang pakiramdam mo. Parang yung lahat na kami doon na mangisda, ganun ang nasasabi namin. Para naman tayong nito, yung dumayo sa ibang bansa na samantalang atin ito, tayo pang binabawalan.
The fishing ground tapped by generations of Filipinos is one of many potential flashpoints for military conflict over the South China Sea. China and Taiwan both claim sovereignty over almost the entire sea, while the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Brunei have competing claims to parts of it. Trillions of dollars worth of shipborne trade passes through the waterway annually, and naval vessels from the U.S. and Western allies sail through it regularly. Of all the claimants, China has in recent years forced its stance most aggressively. Hundreds of Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels prowl the waters, swarming reefs, harassing and attacking fishing and other boats, and interfering in oil and gas exploration and scientific research. In tonight's other news, at least 3 people drowned and nearly 20 others were missing off the Bangladesh coast after a boat carrying Rohingya refugees sank in rough weather. Take a look. Dire conditions in Bangladesh's refugee camps prompt hundreds each year to pay smugglers for passage out of the country. The fishing trawler left at dawn and was bound for Malaysia before it ran into trouble in the Bay of Bengal, with 2 Coast Guard search boats scrambling to rescue survivors. Police said at least 3 bodies had washed ashore at the coastal town of Halbunia. Coast Guard Station Commander Ashio Ahmed said the vessel was believed to be carrying around 65 people after stopping at several coastal towns before embarking. The boat sank off the coast of Cox's Bazar district near the site of sprawling camps that are home to around 1 million Rohingya refugees. Most arrived in Bangladesh 5 years ago after a military crackdown in neighboring Myanmar that is now the subject of a genocide investigation at the UN's top court. The country's military junta said a passenger on board a Myanmar domestic flight was shot in the face when rebels opened fire on the plane as it landed. A bullet passed through the fuselage of the Myanmar National Airlines plane as it made its descent, carrying 63 people into Loy Khao, the capital of Eastern Kaya State. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military coup ousted the civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February last year, with thousands killed in a crackdown on dissent. Anti-coup rebels have sprung up across the country to battle the junta, in some areas allying with local ethnic militias that have been in conflict with the authorities for decades. The plane flying from the capital, Naypyidaw, came under fire at a height of around 1,000 meters, about 6 kilometers north of Loy Khao Airport on Friday morning, according to the junta in a statement. The statement blamed fighters from an anti-junta militia and the Karenni National Progressive Party and ethnic rebel army for the shooting. Meanwhile, the United Nations expressed concern on the ongoing hostilities in Myanmar. Let's listen in.
To Myanmar, our colleagues tell us there that they're concerned about the ongoing hostilities across the country as they continue to endanger the lives and well-being of civilians. More than 1 million people have now been displaced by conflict and insecurity since the military takeover in February of last year. In Rakhine, indiscriminate attacks and the use of landmines and mortar shellings, as well as tight security measures and access constraints, are putting people's lives in danger and preventing assistance from reaching those who actually need it. Nationwide, landmines and explosive remnants of war continue to claim lives and endanger civilians. Food security is also a major concern, as many families are not able to buy enough food due to a spike in prices and of basic commodities.
To Indonesia now, where the police watchdog gave their initial assessment of the stadium tragedy where at least 32 children died. Indonesia's National Police Commission revealed its initial assessment that tear gas launch was not in the police's crowd control plan when the authorities had predicted a potential conflict. Let's listen in.
Tidak ada perintah dari Kapolres, tidak ada perintah dari Kapolres untuk melakukan penguraian massa dengan gas tindakan eksesif, yaitu dengan peluru dengan gas air mata. Tidak ada. Itu sudah disampaikan pada saat apel 5 jam sebelumnya. Perencananya begitu pertandingan selesai, pemain dimasukkan ke badan kuda untuk langsung keluar demi pengamanan. Ini pertimbangannya adalah pertimbangan keamanan. Minimal itu tidak lazim dalam pertandingan sepak bola di seluruh dunia. Tidak lazim karena yang namanya pemain selalu harus menggunakan bis miliknya. Tetapi sudah disiapkan. Tetapi dalam pelaksanaannya Barakuda tidak bisa keluar karena masa di luar sudah sangat banyak.
The terraces of the Kanjuruhan Stadium were packed Saturday evening with 42,000 Aremania or Arema FC fans for a match against fierce rivals Persebaya Surabaya. But after a 3-2 defeat, the first home loss for more than 2 decades to their adversaries, fans streamed down to the pitch to confront players and management. Police described the incident as a riot and said 2 officers were killed, but survivors accused them of overreacting. Officers responded to the pitch invasion with force, kicking and hitting fans with batons, according to witnesses and video footage, prompting more fans to enter the pitch. Indonesian officials said 4,000 more tickets had been allocated for the match than should have been, while some of the stadium's doors appeared to have been shut, according to witnesses. The Malan police chief was replaced on Monday. 9 officers were suspended and 19 others were put under investigation over the disaster in the stadium, which was filled with only hometown Arema FC fans. National Police spokesman Derry Presetio said those suspended were members of the Mobile Brigade Corps, or BRIMOB, a unit that acts as the Special Operations Paramilitary Unit for the Indonesian Police Force, and it's notorious for its aggressive crowd control tactics. Indonesia's Football Association also moved Tuesday to sanction Arema FC, banning its organizing committee chairman and a security officer from Football for Life, and fining the club 250 million rupiah, or $16,000 over the tragedy. In other news, a heavily armed group has killed at least 3 people and injured several more at a logging camp in Papua New Guinea's Bougainville Island, according to police and local government officials. The group attacked the camp in Tonole in the south of the self-governing region of Bougainville on Wednesday, according to the island's authorities. In a statement, police said their officers were still unable to access the logging camp on Monday, which has been occupied by the armed group. Bougainville Police Chief Francis Takura told AFP that a Malaysian national was among those killed. Several others were missing. The motivation for the attack remains unclear, but government officials called for calm between groups involved in the violence. Papua New Guinea's Post-Courier newspaper said around 50 men had entered the camp on Wednesday and began shooting at workers. Land disputes have previously triggered violence in the area. And tonight, the Philippine Statistics Authority said the consumer price index for September this year rose to 6.9%, which is mainly driven by faster food inflation. Here's PSA head and national statistician, Undersecretary Dennis Mapa.
Kung napansin nyo dito sa ating report, ang malaking contribution sa inflation talaga ngayong month ng Setyembre ay food, yung food basket. So, itong food basket kasi dalawa ito, ano? So, of course, yung mga raw materials, ito ay mga about 35% ng ating all-income households. At mayroon pa tayong processed food. Ito yung mga restaurants kanina na mga nasa 9%. So, nakikita namin na ang food in particular ay talagang tumataas. And you will notice doon sa individual subgroups ng mga pagkain, no? 11 yun sila eh. Talagang halos lahat ay tumaas na. At ito ay across different regions, no? If you saw the regional inflation, 15 of the regions outside the NCR ay tumaas ang inflation, at ang malaking nag-push dito ay ang food inflation. So I'd just like to cite some numbers here. Ang food inflation for the Philippines is about 7.7%. That is the food inflation. That carries the weight of about 34.78%. For the National Capital Region, mas mataas ito. Ito ay nasa 8.8%. And for areas outside the National Capital Region, ito ay nasa 7.5%.
And now, Elon Musk offered to push through with his buyout of Twitter at the original agreed price as a trial over his efforts to withdraw from the deal loomed. The world's richest man said in a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission that he sent Twitter a letter vowing to honor the contract. Twitter confirmed to AFP that it received the letter from Mr. Musk and said it intends to close the buyout deal at the agreed-on price of $54.20 per share. Musk said in July he was canceling the purchase because he was misled by Twitter concerning the number of fake bot accounts, allegations rejected by the company. Twitter, meanwhile, has sought to prove Musk was contriving excuses to walk away because he changed his mind. Twitter, meanwhile, has sought to prove that, and so based on the Based on the advertising audience reach numbers published in Twitter's self-service tools in July 2022, there are around 377,000 number of active Twitter users in Central Asia, 30.9 million in Southern Asia, 57.6 million in Southeastern Asia, and in Eastern Asia, 81.6 million. Indonesia is the fourth largest user in the world with at least 21.2 million active Twitter users. Thailand is the 10th largest user in the world with at least 12.9 million active users. And President Bongbong Marcos Jr. today thanked teachers across the country for their invaluable service to the nation, especially amid the resumption of limited face-to-face classes. In his National Teachers Day message, President Marcos urged Filipinos to acknowledge teachers' sacrifices in molding students and preparing them to achieve their dreams. This is also a good opportunity, he said, to express their sincerest appreciation for their invaluable service to the nation as we safely reopen our schools and bring forth a new era of learning amidst the post-pandemic world. He described education as the bedrock of every prosperous society, citing how teachers served as important drivers of our nation. The president expressed confidence that with the help of teachers, the country will grow stronger, with every Filipino becoming more capable of building a better future for all. And today also, President Marcos on Wednesday guaranteed that the Philippines' resiliency and adaptation to the new normals of climate change are on top of his administration's national agenda. The president gave the assurance in a speech delivered during the 2022 Stakeholder Forum organized by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, at the Diamond Hotel in Manila. Let's listen in.
DENR Multi-Stakeholder Forum. It is an important initiative because, as we all know, the issue of climate change is no longer the issue of the day, it is the issue of our times. I have described the global change crisis and the climate change effects on the countries around the world as the first truly global crisis that we have had to face. And I describe it as such for the simple reason that every single citizen of the world is affected by climate change. And it will take the assistance, the help, the understanding of every citizen of the world to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. As your president, I assure you that our environment and our country's resiliency and adaptation to the new normals of climate change are on top of the national agenda. We ensure that the initiatives we will take will enable us to become smarter, more responsible, more sustainable in all that we do. The road ahead will be long and it will be tough. But we must stay strong and accept that it will be a battle that we all must wage. And even more importantly, it's a battle that we must win.
President Marcos said the fight against climate change would only be successful if everyone is committed and determined to steer our practices and systems towards a greener direction. The DENR Forum aims to enable inclusive dialogues across all the agency stakeholders, share stakeholders, experiences of working with different national government offices, foster partnership among stakeholders, and identify multi-stakeholder initiatives that apply science, technology, and innovation to achieve unique values across different sectors. The president hoped that the forum would bring about substantial outcomes that will help enrich the country's national wealth and resources. The Department of National Defense Officer in Charge, Undersecretary Jose Faustino Jr., met with his Japanese and Australian counterparts to discuss ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation. In a statement today, DND spokesperson Arsenia Andolong said Faustino's meetings with Japanese Defense Minister Yasukatsu Hamada and Australian Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister Richard Marles took place on the sidelines of his official visit to Hawaii in the U.S. on September 30 to attend a meeting organized by the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. The discussions during the meeting revolve around the current security developments in the region, particularly the situation in the South and East China Seas, and ways to strengthen Philippine-Japan bilateral defense cooperation through possible conduct of maritime cooperative activities, technology transfers, and dialogues at all levels in order to address shared security challenges and advance cooperation. Meanwhile, Yusek Faustino and Defense Minister Marles exchanged views on the security situation in the Asia-Pacific region. They explored ways to strengthen Philippine-Australian bilateral defense relations through maritime cooperation activities, counter-terror trainings, education, and professionalization opportunities, as well as dialogues and consultations to address shared security challenges and advance common interests. And as my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.